Pete, thank you so much for coming in. We appreciate
Pleasure.
it. Congratulations on your position as a journalist in residence at John Carroll. Exactly what does that mean?
It means that I talk to students, I talk to the faculty, talk to the students about journalism, and also talk to the faculty about maybe how John Carroll can adjust to the changing nature of our business. You know, when I came to NBC, it was just the Today program and nightly news. When I left, it was all of that plus News Now, streaming service, .com, the cable network. You know, as you know so well, the news business is changing, and so how should education change to go along with it? But I think even though it does change, the fundamentals of storytelling don't change.
Yeah, you went to school at Stanford. Yeah,
I did.
University. What's the one thing that students going into this business need to know today that perhaps you didn't need to know when you were in school?
Well, they need to know how to exist in a world controlled by social media. You know, when I was there, electric lights had just been invented when I was in college. But now, you know, the world is so dominated by what you get on your mobile devices that, you know, how should journalism adjust to accommodate to that is the big challenge.
And you're talking to students so far, as you said, you're here for a week to talk to students here. What's the biggest thing that you've heard or the biggest thing that you've learned so far?
Well, actually, I'm here because of Tim Russert. There is a Tim Russert School of Communication at John Carroll University. That was his alma mater. And it was Tim who hired me at NBC, and Tim who became a great friend and was a great advocate for me in my early years at NBC. So I feel an enormous debt to Tim, and that's really the main reason that I'm here. But I have been impressed by something about John Carroll University that, you know, I heard Tim talk about a little bit and didn't fully appreciate that John Carroll tries to encourage its students to look beyond themselves and think about service and think about the lives beyond just their immediate needs. I'm very impressed by that.
This came up earlier in our meeting upstairs, but you retired last summer.
I did.
What do you miss the most about going in every day to the Justice Department?
Well, I miss my colleagues. I miss people like you and people that are here at Channel 3. I miss my colleagues. You know, look, journalists are a pretty interesting bunch of people to be around. They are people who like to find things out and tell stories. And, you know, I'm sure people who sell plumbing fittings are perfectly wonderful too, but I just like hanging out in the company of journalists. And so I miss that. You know, you miss being where the action is, but, you know, it's time to move on.
You became the gold standard of the Justice Department.
Well, I don't know about that.
I will tell you, it is true, and I said something upstairs, I'll say it here. When we would see it, to this day, when the story comes on TV, when you were there, we asked the question, well, what does Pete Williams say? If you're talking to students, how do you become Pete Williams? How do you get to that level? What types of qualities do you think are needed for that?
First, you have your face hideously disfigured to look like me. Then, yeah, you know, I always tried to do my homework. I always tried to be the person who knew that arcane little thing that nobody else did. You know, read the documents, read the legal briefs, learn as much as you can. I think it's all born of insecurity because, you know, you're always afraid of what you don't know. And so I think that's actually a tremendously powerful motivator.
Covering the Justice Department for 30 years, in your wildest dreams, do you ever see the court going into the direction that it's going into right now?
No, because, you know, I covered it during that period of long stability from 1994 when Stephen Breyer came onto the Supreme Court until 2005 when Chief Justice William Rehnquist died. We went 11 years with no change at all in the Supreme Court. And then we went through those changes with the death of Antonin Scalia, the retirement of Anthony Kennedy, the retirement of Sandra Day O'Connor, the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the retirement of David Souter, and so on, where the court now is the only, Clarence Thomas is the only justice left from that period of stability. So it is a much more conservative court, and not just conservative in outcome, but aggressively conservative in the kinds of cases that they want to take and decide now. I think that the conservatives have been in the minority for so long, now they have the votes and they're eager to make up for lost time.
You think we're going to see more of this as we move forward, more of this aggressive conservatism?
No question. I think this term will bring the end of affirmative action in school admissions, probably a cutback in the power of the Voting Rights Act, and, you know, more conservative changes like that.
And as we know, this is a glacial pace. The Supreme Court moves at a glacial pace in terms of movement, in terms of ideology. So this is going to be around for a while.
Yes, you know, if you look at the Supreme Court, under the light fixtures, the light standards in the front is a turtle. To emphasize the slow-moving nature of justice. So yes, these changes will happen very slowly.
I heard Sandra Day O'Connor talk about how the press in general covers the court system, and she said the problem she had was the press in general doesn't cover the process. It needs to do that a little more. Would you agree with that at all?
Yeah, I actually think she's right. And, you know, the thing about Sandra Day O'Connor that she spent so much time after she left the court doing is saying how important civics education is. You know, when you and I went to school, we took civics. They don't teach that so much anymore. And I have thought that journalists have a responsibility to explain the process of government because so many of our readers and listeners and viewers don't understand, you know. So when a case came to the Supreme Court, I thought it was important not only to explain what the court decided, but why, what the court's reasoning was, what were the laws or the constitutional provisions behind that. And I think any reporter who covers government, whether it's at the Cleveland local level or in Washington, has to do more of that.
You still a news junkie? Do you watch the news every night? And
oh, absolutely.
How do you view it today as opposed to when you were in the thick of it? Any differently at all?
Yes, I don't think, well, why was that piece on instead of mine?
I get it. I totally get it. You have now, as you said, retired since last July. What's life like? What are you doing these days?
You know, I was so worried when I retired that I would sit around and feel useless, and the phone wouldn't ring, and I would no longer be at the center of the action, that I'm kind of overbooked. I'm delighted to do the journalist in residence thing here at John Carroll University. I've done it at another place as well. I have set myself out to do some documentary work, maybe a podcast or two, do a little speaking. So, you know, I'm overbooked already.
It is a pleasure to have you in Cleveland.
Great to see you,
John
Russ.
Carroll, you said the hipsters call it Carroll.
That's
right?
what I learned. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
All right, my pleasure.